audience check. Just make sure everyone's still ready to go. Clap your hands if you learned something new today. And this is probably even more important. Clap your hands if you met someone new today. That's what events like this is all that are all about. It's all about connecting with other folks and working together to help solve some of these challenges. And that's kind of been the theme about how we put together this conference. But a little bit of housekeeping. If you have questions, just submit them on the Slido app. We got a quick demo on it earlier today, so if I mess it up, just be gentle with me, please. I'll figure it out as we go. This is a session. It's called Accelerate Impact. I'm Mike Menendez of Southern Impact Investing Alliance and also co-founder of the Impact Alliance. There's some more information about us and what we do on the tables outside. But what you're really here to see is to talk to these, watch me talk to these fine panelists here. So I'm really excited to have such a great group of people assembled for today. I'm going to go ahead and sit down now. And let me introduce our panelists. So first, we'll start with you, Grace. We have Grace Rodriguez, CEO and Executive Director of Impact Hub Houston. Grace Rodriguez helps do-gooders do greater. I have to say that's probably my favorite introductory line I think I've ever read. So really excited to have her here. Impact Hub Houston, if you don't know, is a locally rooted, globally connected organization that's a vibrant part of the world's largest network focused on building entrepreneurial ecosystems for impact at scale. Grace is passionate about bringing people together and uplifting others through servant leadership, which she practices as a member of the City of Houston's Women and Minority Business Task Force, an advisor for TMC Innovation Institute, Houston Exponential, TX RX Labs, Houston Public Media, and as a committee member for the Midtown Management District and Discovery Green, as a board member for Writers in the School, and a lead organizer for Women in Tech Houston and TEDx Houston. So everyone give a round of applause.
I make it.
All right, next I have Youngro Lee. He is CEO and co-founder of NextSeed. NextSeed is a fintech company that operates a community-driven online investment platform enabling investments in local projects by anyone. And NextSeed Securities LLC, an SEC registered broker-dealer. Prior to founding NextSeed, Youngro was a corporate attorney specializing in private equity fund formation and private investments for 8 years at leading international law firms in the US, Europe, and Asia. Youngro is passionate about community development and building awesome places, especially in Houston. So everyone please welcome. Last but certainly not least is Kyle Lukianuk. Kyle is a social entrepreneur with a love for business and a passion for the power of millennials to address world-scale changes. Kyle is a co-founder of the Good Returns model and current president of Good Returns, a hybrid social enterprise that uniquely brings together corporations, foundations, investors, and impact organizations to scale sustainable solutions to our world's most pressing challenges. He was selected as one of the new leaders in social enterprise by the Social Enterprise Alliance in 2015. In 2017, he was one of the 24 individuals selected to participate in the University of Pennsylvania's Global Social Impact House. And in 2018, he received the Global Game Changer Award Under 30 from the Dallas Global Chamber. Kyle is a graduate of the Southern Methodist University, and he has called Dallas home for 12 years. Prior to Good Returns, he worked in finance and risk management, most recently at KPMG, and he also served on the board for Chiapas International, a nonprofit addressing global poverty. Please give me a Kyle. We're driving down to Houston on a holiday weekend, so applaud him for that. I told you we had a great group. Let me go ahead and just jump into some of the questions. This first series of questions are really geared to help the audience understand a little bit more about your organization and what you do. Youngro, I'm going to start with you. Why did you start NextSeed? What was there a particular problem that you saw and that you wanted to solve?
Yeah, so first of all, it's just, I think it was you just mentioned the Jobs Act. So we started out wanting to be that, so we were actually the very first funding pool approved by the SEC to affect this transaction of private companies raising capital online from anybody, including non-accredited investors. So and everything's digital, everything's tech, that's the only way we can actually do this. So if you go to nextseed.com, you can kind of see what we do, but literally local projects, you like it, press a button, invest. Previous to this, I spent 8 years as a corporate lawyer in private equity. And really, this is actually, everything kind of led to what I'm doing today, which is I started my career in 2007 literally on Wall Street at a firm called Lukianuk, which was a firm that was representing the Feds in the Lehman crisis. So for me, I think for people that are kind of my age, probably older millennials or younger Gen X, in the early mid-2000s, if you remember, like there wasn't even tech. It was finance was like the thing. Like go to Wall Street, go to private equity, make a lot of money, retire in 10 years. And I'm not gonna lie, that might have been one of my dreams as well. Until I started actually work, and it was like, okay, just kidding. That's not gonna happen because the world changed. And that's when I personally learned a lot about the capital markets and Wall Street, and especially in the high finance world, if you will, which is nothing that 99.9% of the world understands. So I made a conscious decision as a junior attorney at a corporate law firm to focus on private side, because fundamentally I believe that's the future of whatever we want to think about from an investment perspective, from a growth perspective, and everything else. And for me as a person, that's what I want to bet my career on, and not trading stocks. So that's kind of how I spent the next 8 years. I spent 1 year, most of the time in the US, but also 1 year in Moscow, and then a couple years in Shanghai and Hong Kong. And really, the theme of my personal career was I wanted to go to places where other people weren't going, because frankly, that's where the investment opportunities are. And I learned a lot, I grew a lot, and kind of fast forward, when the jobs that came out in 2012, and the proposed rules came out towards the end of 2014. It's kind of like, it's kind of cheesy, but literally, like the light bulbs went off. It was, okay, like everything, like literally my entire livelihood was based on this premise that when I have a good deal, I'm going to structure it. I'm going to go to the richest people I know, or the wealthiest firms I know. I'm going to sell it to them. I'm going to make money off of them and the businesses. Like that's the entire premise of the capital. And I'm overly generalizing intentionally for making an impact, but that was the premise. When you change that arbitrary limitation of private deals, or really any deals, are not limited to the super wealthy individuals, firms. But when I say super wealthy, it's not even millionaire, right? It's like hundreds and billionaires at that level.
The billionaires and the billionaires.
The billionaires don't count in the world of the private world. So in that world, but if you change that system of actually there might be a different way. Actually, I don't need to go to that one rich person in my family or whatever, and I can share my idea globally, and other people can participate based on the merits of my business or my character. It changes everything, right? And that's the dream side of it. Obviously, the reality is then you got to build a business. That's what we've been doing the last 5 years. But I would say that's what led me. I mean, personally, I was born in Korea. I moved to North America when I was young, and going through the own immigrant journey of myself and understanding how to adapt and live, kind of going up to the most corporate world you can imagine, and understanding, oh my God, there's a new law that can change things, and of course reality is always more difficult, but fundamentally I would say that was the ambitious me thinking I can do it, and I left it, and the rest is history.
Well, we're glad that you did. Was there something specific about Texas that made it?
Yeah, so Texas is before the national laws got finalized, which will only happen in 2016, individual states were passing state crowdfunding laws. So literally that's why we were in Texas. Texas happened to pass a state crowdfunding law. As long as you're operating in Texas with Texas residents only, you can technically do this. And so if you guys have some time, if you go to East Downtown China and Kirby, which is one of the popular bars and lounges in Houston, that was the first major deal that we completed. We raised close to $400,000 for 270 people, most of them from literally Houston, because they want to go to their neighborhood bar, and they're getting paid on a monthly basis based on the profits of the business.
And so that's an example of one of the awesome places that you wanted to build in Houston.
Yeah, and Houston to me is personal now that I've settled down here, but it's also economical. I mean, maybe the two different questions, but I'm still surprised when I get invited to impact conferences, because if you look at my bio, and so maybe it will change, but I've never, from day one to now, claimed to be an impact investor or NextSeed as an impact platform, right? Because to me, everything starts from the investment side. When we're talking about finance, obviously there's different topics, but if you're talking about investments, you start with an investment, because otherwise nobody's going to give you money,
Right.
no matter what they say, in meetings. So that's kind of
and we're going to jump into that.
The simple answer is I think there's tremendous opportunity in Houston specifically in private businesses in ways that other top tier U.S. cities don't offer because of cost of living, cost of land, and all of them.
Got it. Kyle, can you tell us a little bit about the good returns model, what it is, and maybe how you came about?
Yeah, definitely. So my background kind of started off in corporate America. I started at Bank of America, and then switched to KPMG, and through that process, just kind of saw the amount of resources that corporations have. If you want to look at something that might upset you a little bit, go look up how much corporations contribute to overall philanthropic giving in the U.S. Individuals make up about 80% of it. Corporations make up about less than 5% of it. And I set out and looked at that and took a different approach than most people do. I'm not mad at corporations for that. I kind of saw it that corporations are set up to do a certain set of things, and giving away money is not one of them. And what I saw is that as a society, we didn't really have systems and infrastructure put in place that allows corporations to participate fully. So we have corporations that are setting record-setting profits, but we're not seeing a proportional increase in the amount that they give back to their communities. And that's simply because they're controlled by shareholders. And I'm generalizing mostly through publicly traded corporations and things like that. But shareholders generally say, don't give away my money, and that's fair. And we set out to kind of build a new model, one that I think is somewhat effective, and one that I hope is only one of thousands that we come up with. And I say us as collectively as a society. But we set out to help companies provide interest-free loans to impact organizations, or social enterprises as people like to refer to them. And these are short-term working capital loans that are interest-free, that is 100% focused on maximizing impact. And what it does is it allows corporations to use their balance sheet versus their income statement. And I know that's kind of getting technical, but since we're here talking about impact investing, I'm going to take some liberties on that. But it's a new way for corporations and maybe CFOs and marketing teams to use more of their budget effectively. And over time, we found some really neat synergies with this. One of the things that we didn't expect is when you partner a big brand or a corporation with a social enterprise, there's an amazing storytelling channel that you open up. So when Danny was up here talking about Scriptly and some of the things that they need, capital is really important, and we want to provide that. But almost just as important is connecting these organizations to brands that can share their story very effectively. So we mentioned Tom's earlier, and maybe this wasn't the best thing to happen, but when Tom's partnered with AT&T, that was a huge inflection point for that brand. That allowed them to get into almost every single household and increase their sales, increase the amount of shoes that they could give away, which, again, may not have been the best thing. But there's a huge potential when you connect these brands in a very authentic, capital-focused way, that you can capture that impact and share it. And by the way, the brands want to tell those stories, because as we talked about a little bit, there's value in that for corporations. And so what we set out to do is kind of build the first ever positive ROI, proven ROI component around corporate philanthropic activities. And then the last thing that we built to kind of encourage corporations to do this is we now can offer a dollar-for-dollar guarantee back to the corporation. And we do that through an impact investment vehicle. So we partnered with an asset manager in Dallas, and impact investors and foundations can put their money into a fund. It gets invested into the market based on a certain strategy. So it could be in stocks, bonds, commodities, things like that. And then that investment is used as collateral to guarantee every single loan. And so what that does is it allows corporations to start using their corpus. We don't want to replace charitable giving from corporations. What we want to do is mobilize the resources that traditionally sit on the sidelines and use it for social impact.
And I have a lot of questions about that.
I'm sure you do.
Grace, Sharoy was up here earlier and talked a little bit about Impact Hub. For the folks who may have not been in the room, could you just give us an overview of Impact Hub and maybe maybe some of the ways that you help empower social entrepreneurs in the community.
So as we were saying, and Troy said earlier, Impact Hub Houston is one of over 100 Impact Hubs around the world, in over 50 countries, and we are aligned with the United Nations to support change makers and social entrepreneurs who are working towards the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Impact Hub Houston was originally led and founded by Natasha Azizi and Shiroi Spandiar. And before joining the Impact Hub Houston leadership team, I was advising, but I had co-founded Station Houston, a tech startup hub. And in the summer of last year, Shiroi reached out and asked if I'd be interested in taking more of a leadership role with Impact Hub Houston. And the reason why I was really excited about this opportunity to join the team was that at Station, we were focused on supporting high growth, high potential tech startups. And so we would have some entrepreneurs who would come to us and say, well, I want to develop an app. You know, how can I create impact by developing an app? I'm interested in AI, I'm interested in blockchain. It was very tech focused versus problem focused, even though as much as we preach, you know, lean startup and human-centered design starts with the problem and empathy with the people that you're serving. So moving over to Impact Hub Houston, we're trying to take some of the best practices from other organizations around the world. We're trying to learn from what has been tried here and hasn't been successful, and making sure that we try to figure out a better way of doing that. One of those things is, for instance, how do we develop a better, more impactful mentorship program? So the cafe-style mentorship program I've seen doesn't work very well with a lot of entrepreneurs, because you might meet with Youngro, for instance, once every quarter, and that's only going to help you hold yourself accountable, for instance, and make sure that whatever advice he gave you, you're able to implement, or you're able to continue iterating on. So we want to make sure that we're matching mentors with mentees, and they commit to at least 3 months to be meeting with them. We don't want to overburden either one of those people, so we should know we're having at least 3 to 5 mentors per mentee and 3 to 5 mentees per mentor, for instance. And then we're also thinking about how do we provide access to capital for a lot of our social entrepreneurs, because we also have entrepreneurs who are very new to entrepreneurship and to the startup scene here, and they hear so much about venture capital, so they think, oh, how do I create a pitch deck so I can talk to venture capitalists here? And that's not necessarily the best thing for them at the stage that they're at. So we're talking with people like NextSeed and Collaboration Capital and different funding institutions and lending institutions, and figuring out what is the best guide or matrix for people who are at different stages and different industries and have different business models, and how do we help them figure out what is the best mix for me. So those are some of the things we're really thinking through with Impact Hub Houston. We're very new in terms of launching our products and services and our offerings. We're launching our community membership next week. And our goal with the membership, so you see with co-working spaces, for instance, there's usually a virtual membership and then a hot desk membership, and that was kind of the model with Station Houston and with the Canon.
Sure. And
we're thinking through how do we make sure that we lower the barrier to entry for a lot of the entrepreneurs, especially diverse entrepreneurs around the city. So we're starting with just a $35 tier, for which you can still get access to the community app, which connects all of the impact hubs around the world. So if you're working on solar energy, for instance, or different types of energy tech solutions here, clean tech solutions here, how can you connect with people in Southeast Asia and then people in Africa who might be working on similar problems, and share best practices, share what you've tried, and so on. And then how do we also share access to potential investors, potential ecosystems, and that kind of thing. And then we're offering with that tier access to the global passport, so if you do travel to other parts of the world, you'll be able to work at an impact hub. And then we'll see, do we need to create another tier for that? If not, let's try to provide as many services as possible to people at that stage or at that price point. But again, we're building this as we go along, right?
Sure.
We're a startup ourselves, so how do we integrate the way in a way that's responsive to our community?
And you also host quite a few events. Are there any events that stick out in your mind in terms of really represent what Impact Hub does, or just put a smile on your face? I mean,
Yeah.
some of the ones that you have are really fantastic.
So we have 4 recurring events.
Yeah.
One is the community potluck, where we invite the community to bring a dish, and we all commune together, so that's a way of making a more social community engagement, community development kind of event. Another one is Open Project Night, which we partner with Sketch City, which is a local nonprofit that convenes a lot of the technologists in our city. So if you pay attention to what was happening in the tech community during Hurricane Harvey and afterwards, a lot of the solutions were developed by a lot of tech volunteers who came out of Sketch City. So Open Project Night, we invite anybody from the community, and especially people from local government, to present problems and present projects that they're working on. And then the people from the audience are able to engage with them and say, how can I help you, or this is what I can apply to that, and help them think through that and potentially support them. Another event is a social entrepreneurship meetup for people to learn more about what social entrepreneurship is. And then the fourth one is, I don't know if it's my language, but it's called Fuck Up Nights. And but it was started in Mexico City, and it's now in over 200 cities around the world. And it's where people can share their fail stories. So we invite entrepreneurs to come in and, in a very safe, comfortable, relaxed environment, really share what they tried and failed. Because often we learn the best lessons from having failed. And as much as we talk about failing forward in the tech community, how are we actually rewarding that in some way and celebrating that in that way so people can feel comfortable with failing and sharing that.
So, Youngro, I want to kind of thread it back to that kind of theme of democratizing finance, because really that seemed to be very important to you. On both sides, one, for businesses, they have the opportunity to have a larger amount of investors, or say folks that have an invested interest in their success, and then also too for the investors that have an opportunity to invest. Can you tell us a little bit about how that interplay happens and like what that can do in terms of scaling investments in local businesses?
Yeah. So not just us, but other investment platforms with the regulatory license that we have. At its core, all it is a technology platform where a business, or really a project that's looking for capital, is explaining their story in a digital lens. So instead of a traditional investor pitch, as you might imagine, it's like, I gotta find this guy, I gotta have dinner with him for 2 hours, and follow up with documents and financials. I mean, it's just a very inefficient process. There's literally a limit on how much you can do. Whereas using kind of new laws of technology, you're just basically posting your story, and that's kind of where the user interface and the product and design that matters. You're basically telling your story in a much more efficient way. So from a security perspective, you're basically distributing securities much more effectively than a traditional way.
Sure. On
the investor side, it's really simple. Is literally, unless you were a credit investor, you just couldn't invest in anything before. Right. So now you can. And that brings with it different opportunities with different challenges, because it's scary. Like, it's real money. Again, this is why it's very different when somebody's saying I'm interested versus I'm going to give you, I'm actually sending you the wire. It's like night and day. So sure. that is the process that we try to make easier and more comfortable. Right. And when it happens, and I would say, generally speaking, for online investment crowdfunding, it's most effective for businesses that are literally looking for that consumer or public engagement, right? If you're a beauty business that sells, $1 million contracts to Exxon, like I'm not sure if that really adds too much, because all you need is just this hyper sales guy. But if you are a product company, if you are selling food, or if you're selling whatever, if you're a gym, or it can be a tech company that has you want 1 million downloads the next day. Like any products like that, it just enables the communication in much more effective way than obviously ever before.
So you talked about making on the investor side that sometimes it's scary, or you see some drop-off rates in terms of interest to actual funding. What are some of the things that NextSeed does on the front end, maybe on the due diligence of vetting opportunities? And can you talk a little bit about your process? And for those aspiring entrepreneurs out there, what does a successful package look like when it comes across your desk?
And this is even why, even within any industry, there's innovation. So every platform has a different process on how they work with businesses. Some are listing platforms where any business that legally meets the minimum requirement just posts your deal, and whoever wants to invest will invest. On NextSeed, we do have a more formal diligence process. Now we have to. We're a broker dealer, which legally requires to do diligence. So the business plan application itself is probably not different than any other request for funding from any organization. Business plan financials, we do background checks, make sure you go to jail with fraud and all that stuff. And again, the difference is it's not that we have a pile of money to give you, but if you meet those criteria, I think historically less than 3% of businesses that apply on the platform. All we're saying is this is the deal, and we're not as a corporate, we can't also like tell people, hey, that's like this. It's just presenting the opportunity, and you do have to decide if you want to participate or not. That's also one of the reasons. So our theme, this is a business strategy, not a legal strategy. Business strategy is local. In fact, our slogan is invest local everywhere, and we own that trade, and that's the basis of everything that we do. Because when you don't know something, you're most likely to invest in something that you do know, and for most of us, it's local. Right? I might feel very scared to invest in some crazy startup in San Francisco that I have no idea, even if something tells me that's good, versus there's a thing 10 minutes away, I can go knock on the door. It's a lot more encouraging, and that's to me impact. I mean, like there's a million different ways to
Sure.
No. That's how we kind of think about it as enabling impact through investments.
Right. Okay.
It's also kind of like what Amanda said earlier, invest with your dollars, right? So if I want to see this in my community, I can actually give them that.
Right. Kyle, I was really fascinated by the good returns model, but I was really interested in how do you go about having those discussions with a company who's traditionally doing regular philanthropy, right? Just doing grants, because like you and I talked a little bit about before, is that there's this notion of kind of like two-pocket thinking, right? It's like my philanthropic dollar, this is my business dollar, and how do you get them over that? Like, what are some of the maybe objections that you encounter, and how do you overcome some of those objections to move into bring over a new corporate partner?
Yeah, so our main goal is to sit down with CMOs and CFOs and chief human resource officers because of the nature of our work and that we try to enable corporations to invest in their communities. A lot of times we get pigeonholed into corporate foundations or CSR teams. We don't shy away from that. If you've ever worked with large corporate brands, you usually take the relationship that you get and you try your best to work with it. And that's what we do. The great thing about the corporate foundation, like one of our clients that we started, we call our process a cycle. We started a cycle with in late 2018. We worked with their foundation, and they have a corpus, basically a pool of cash that they have to sit on each year. And because we have the guarantee, we were able to mobilize those resources into a Dallas-based cycle, into organizations that serve Dallas communities. And that's great for us because now we're having the conversation this next year, and we're at the table with their corporate side. So we're no longer in the philanthropic sort of arena that we're working with. But what we're doing hasn't really been done before. And so I would say the biggest challenge for us is meeting whoever we're talking to, trying to meet their needs. So when you're going in and talking, I had a corporate foundation person who said, we invested in Kiva 2 years ago, and they wrote us a check back at the end of the year, and we didn't know what to do with it, and we were upset about it. Which is just mind-blowing to me, because they're like, it was at the end of our fiscal year, we all wanted to go home for the holidays, and now we have this check that we had to give away. We had to go through the work and find the organization. And to me, I'm like, am I hearing this correctly? But their needs or what they were graded on as foundation staff was different than what I expected from, say, a corporate landscape, where a CFO is like, how much money did I make? Or how did our investment portfolio perform? And so one of the key things that I like to do is when I come into a meeting, not say, here's what we do, but ask what they do. Because one of the things that I like about the good returns model is we can adapt it to kind of meet the needs of different folks. So when I'm talking to a chief marketing officer, and what they care about is that they have this new product that's launching, the good returns model can plug into any revenue-producing product. So if you wanted to turn the pumpkin spice latte from Starbucks into a good returns latte, you can do that. It's just a 1-year deferment or delay on the revenue from that product, and you can self-finance that. Starbucks has plenty of cash to do that. You could do that, and it totally revolutionizes the impact of that product. But that's a whole different discussion than talking to Starbucks Foundation. So I like to sit down, understand what the needs are, and then say, hey, here's where I think we might be able to help you. And maybe that's a yes, maybe it's a no. Generally, we've had more success with financial companies, so banks really like what we're doing because they understand the financial innovation. And what I haven't seen so much on is kind of the consumer-facing branch, which was surprising to me.
Yeah, that is
Because the story and what we're seeing is that millennial consumers, Gen Z consumers, they want more purpose with their products. And we're trying to enable that in a big way. They're just not thinking through that process right now, at least the ones that we've talked to. And I'm expecting that, 5 years ago when I met with the first company, they were like, no way. Have you ever done this before? This is ridiculous. All the naysayers.
Sure.
And now it's changed, and I'm so excited to see, 5 years from now, what that looks like.
caught up to you.
Yeah, and the big thing is we've had so many people tell us to go to San Francisco, go to New York, go to the coast and do this. And we've been very stubborn in staying here in Texas. We have such a great landscape here in Texas. When you talk about the corporate space, the philanthropic sector, and I'm mostly quoting data from Dallas, but we have one of the highest philanthropic sectors per capita in Dallas. We have a huge concentration of Fortune 500 companies, which I know Houston does as well. And more businesses are moving every single year to Dallas. And I keep looking at social entrepreneurs that leave Dallas, and I'm like, how are we going to change the landscape here if everyone's going to the coast and making San Francisco a cooler place? It is cool enough. I've been there. It's awesome. But like here in Texas, we just have these qualities that Youngro is talking about that I think is different from any other state and group of cities that I'm really excited that these conversations are happening.
So how active are you in terms of a matchmaker between finding an impact organization, vetting an impact organization, and actually connecting them with the team?
Extremely active.
Okay.
So the thing, and one of the services that we provide is we're not providing capital to your run-of-the-mill nonprofit. So we're not, providing loans to organizations that run on grants and donations because that doesn't really serve a purpose to scale their impact. So for a lot of these companies, they may not even know what a social enterprise is or an impact organization is, and they certainly aren't plugged into that ecosystem and understand what those are. And for us, because we're lending and not taking equity or things like that, we're sort of tax structure agnostic. So we get to provide loans to both nonprofits and for-profits. What we look for is this underlying sustainable business model that is 100% connected to the impact that they're trying to create. And so we facilitate that relationship. We meet with the company and understand, hey, what are you guys interested? So maybe it's the environment, maybe it's women's empowerment, maybe it's the effects of incarceration. And then we go find the organizations that fit that profile, and then we run the due diligence, the underwriting, all that, to make sure that our guarantors don't have unneeded risk. And then we facilitate that whole process from initiating the capital through the storytelling and then getting that capital repaid at the end.
Got it. I'd like to kind of shift the conversation a little bit to what success looks like, maybe some of the ways that you measure the impact. And Grace, I know that there was some discussion about the Sustainable Development Goals, and can you tell us a little bit about what Impact Hub Houston is doing around sustainable the SDGs, and if there's some specific ones that you're focusing on, and maybe some programming that you're looking at maybe doing.
So it's interesting because there are two aspects to supporting the SDGs when you're looking at the lens of Impact Hub Houston. One is the types of entrepreneurs that we support. So we support entrepreneurs who focus on any of the SDGs, 17 SDGs. But Impact Hub Houston as an organization is focused on how do we disrupt 5 of them, or how do we advance progress towards 5 of them. And gender equality, reducing inequalities, smart cities and communities, partnerships towards the goals, and access to decent work and economic growth. Those are the ones that we're trying to make sure that we're intentional and thoughtful about how do we make sure more of the diverse population of Houston is actually participating in entrepreneurship. How we measure that is, it's an evolving discussion because nobody is really measuring it well right now. Right? So coming out of the tech community, we've seen how different hubs will say so many hundreds of companies have come through our space and they've raised over so many millions of dollars, but nobody's shown what they did that actually helped those companies launch and grow. Right. One of the things we're thinking about is how do we track that? And we're talking with the co-founders of Topple, which is a company that was co-founded here in Houston. The office is here in Amsterdam. but they're building a platform on the blockchain where you are able to track and measure impact.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of consulting, as the panelists earlier had said. It depends on how we want to measure it, and how our entrepreneurs also want to measure it, so we can do that, a report for ourselves and a report for the entire community. But I just came back from the Kaufman eShip Summit, right? So it's a summit for a lot of ecosystem builders around the country. And I was able to have a conversation with somebody who's working on rural innovation. And he said, there's so many people who are participating that aren't being counted. For instance, he told me the story of a woman entrepreneur who was making hair bows.
Mm-hmm.
She said she's selling some bows in her local shop, but if you ask the UPS driver who's actually selling online, she's making over $1 million by selling her hair bows online.
Oh, wow.
But there's no way of finding her because she doesn't report, right? So, like, how do you find more women entrepreneurs who don't report, like, who don't identify as social entrepreneur, for instance, or aren't looking for assistance? I was also talking to a woman who's working on economic development in Wisconsin, and she said, we're also looking at credit score. Are you helping people improve? Are their credit scores improving? Because maybe even if they don't eventually become an entrepreneur, the knowledge that you've given them is helping them make better decisions, right? So I don't know all of those answers yet, but we're trying to tease some of those insights out from other organizations and hopefully make that into the way we measure it.
Great, no, thank you for that. Youngro, just to kind of give folks an idea of the scale in terms of businesses that have gotten funded through NextSeed, maybe the amount of capital that's gone, and maybe kind of just the breadth of investors that have come to the platform. Could you give us an idea of
Yeah, I mean, so regulation crowdfunding literally passed in May 2016, so it's only been a couple of years. So on NextSeed, we funded, I think now we're approaching about $15 million to local businesses, plus 50 plus. But I would say the majority of that is really the last year, and we're seeing, I mean, just in our pipeline, we have like $30 million deals coming up. And this is kind of, across the industry, this is regular crowdfunding. It's been about $200 million since the law was passed. So in the world of capital market, it's still nothing, right, to be honest. But the point that we made to whoever wants to listen and care about it, that's literally $200 million that probably would have never gone to these businesses. Sure. And most of these businesses are not your standard, it's not Uber, right? It's literally the small businesses. Most of them are not in the coast, and that's actually been one of the biggest, I would say, changes that I've personally seen in the last couple of years. In the beginning, and this is as context, in the beginning when I started this, for example, like everybody, it was very controversial, as you can imagine. Everybody thought this was a mechanism for grandmas to get ripped off, and snake-oil salesmen to take over the world. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of challenges politically. But when we started doing the kind of business we have, and that's why the stories are really important, to show that this is actually, number one, getting capital into local businesses and communities that can be building capital, but number two, we're actually generating investment returns for individual investment in having. Conversations have changed. So there's that just a couple of weeks ago, I'm actually also on the SEC Small Business Capital Formation Advisory Committee. So I was in DC, my first meeting, literally talking with Chairman Kling and the commissioners and other 10-member committee about how do we actually further amend the Jobs Act to increase the investment limits, increase the capital limits. Right. And all these conversations are happening because people are actually seeing what is possible. And that's the one thing that I always tell to other entrepreneurs, I mean, depending on what side of the equation you're sitting in, but no matter what, if you really care about it, like, just do it. Like, it doesn't matter how many stats you measure, how many things you look at. If you do it and you show it, like, people will see it, and that's what's going to move the needle.
And Kyle, I didn't know that Good Returns uses SDGs as a framework. Can you talk a little bit about how you implement those or how you use those?
Yeah, there were so many of them, so and we didn't want to put them just use that as the rigid framework. But we identified 8 areas that were a little more high level that kind of mapped to those SDGs. And the whole point of that was, we get impact organizations that reach out to us quite a bit, and we needed some framework to say you're qualified or you're not qualified. And so the way that we kind of overarching kind of do that is we say that it needs to be a key human need, and we think that the UN's SDGs does a really good job of kind of setting that umbrella and making it so that we don't be the determining factor of what qualifies and what doesn't.
Sure.
And so even though the spaying and neutering of cats and dogs is a great thing to be working on.
Sure.
That doesn't qualify within our framework as something that we would fund and that we would bring to a corporation. Even if a corporation said, hey, that's what we want to do, that's what we're focused on. Like if a dog food company did that, it's just not what we set out as the DNA of our organization and the issues that we wanted to solve.
I kind of want to circle back a little bit for Youngro and for Kyle. Can you give us an estimate of like the average ticket size or investment size that is normally maybe going to an impact organization in your case, and maybe an average investor ticket for
the investors?
Yeah.
So because right now we're basically working with the non-credit investors, average investment of $1,500.
Okay.
Minimum investment is $100. So that's also one way to make it accessible is you don't need to go through all kinds of, if you're really that scared, fine, invest $100, we don't like it, don't use it ever again. But what we actually see is, the moment they get their first $2 deposit in their account, it's like, oh my God, this is interesting. Yeah. And we see the lifetime investment grow. So for example, a lifetime investment for an investor is about, I think about $3,500. So that's on the local investor side of a smaller project. But that's one of the reasons, as a business matter, we decided to become a broker dealer. So now we're actually doing larger transactions where check sizes are going to go pretty high, and this is where a different way that we can literally utilize capital markets because of what we're doing, we actually are getting now, ironically, the calls from the institutions and family offices that absolutely love what we do,
right.
But they're not going to sit there on their computer and click a button to invest. They're like, here's $1 million, can you invest in these things for us?
Okay.
So for us, it's almost like that's not what we want to do, but if you're going to provide that, let's think about how to leverage that alongside the online platform. So there's a lot of strategies I'm working on to basically better leverage those kind of capital. But the key takeaway for our team always is, I think something was mentioned, like look at the market. So what is the market telling us they want? And basically be able to leverage that, but you have to be able to speak the language of the capital source, because somebody from, I think, the previous family office or institutional investment speaks a very different language than you as an individual thinking, hey, I have $5,000 to invest.
Right. And Kyle, could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so our capital is a little bit different because it's debt, but it really depends on the organization. It comes out of our underwriting process, and as part of that, we ask for a minimum from the impact organizations themselves. And why that's important is because it's debt and the clock starts ticking on the repayment right away, they need enough capital to actually do something with it. So if they need $250,000 to start a project and we only give them $50,000, it may take them 6 months to raise the additional $200,000. And now they've burned 6 months worth of working capital in that case. And so we have that conversation up front. And then on top of that, we run a whole risk-adjusted model to figure out what's the actual position that we're willing to take with our debt within that organization. And somewhere between that is kind of usually where the capital falls. For us, logistically, we like to kind of be in the 50,000 to 150,000 range, just because it's just as much work to underwrite an organization for a $5,000 loan generally as it is for a $250,000 loan.
Great. Now I'd like to shift the conversation a little bit to really talk about your broad vision of the world, right? I'm going to give each of you a magic wand. I'll give you a couple of seconds to kind of think about it. And, you know, if you could wave a wand and have all of the policies that you could have in place to implement your vision, what would you want or desire? And whoever wants to jump in first. I know it's kind of a big question, but I thought this would be kind of fun for the audience.
Let's jump on that.
Yeah. Well, I wish there were a social entrepreneur doctor, right? Like, so if you could plug in all of the elements of what you're doing, what you're looking for, baseball marketer, and it could spit out, here's what you should do next, right? I think the two questions I hear most from entrepreneurs are, who do I need to talk to and what do I do next? So if you could actually prescribe those things to people at different stages along their growth, that would be really helpful for helping more do-gooders do greater.
There you go.
Well, for me, I mean, I'm sure I could just add to this all day, but and this isn't really a policy or anything like that, but I think the philanthropic side of things just needs to get smarter, or maybe willing to take more risk. I think we're starting to have these conversations on how philanthropy can be leveraged to mobilize other resources at 100 times and 1,000 times. But I think that talking needs to actually be put into place. And the philanthropic sector needs to start investing more in infrastructure and the ecosystem. So what I mean by that is there are so many needs that need to be solved, but the philanthropic system is so heavily weighted to treating the symptoms instead of the root causes of the issue, which tends to take longer and it's not as sexy up front. But if we don't start doing it today, then it will never be addressed and we'll always be treating the symptoms, and the symptoms will only become more prevalent. And so I would just love, and I think the philanthropic sector is starting to do that, but we need to have more leaders with more resources willing to step up and participate.
I feel blessed because I'm actually able to at least try to keep creating the vision for the world that I want to be in. And it's, to be clear, when I left law, it was because I wanted to make an impact. I didn't want to just keep doing what I was doing, making my extremely wealthy clients richer. It was, I wanted to make a difference. I know that sounds cheesy, but in the context that we're talking about, the main thing I want to say, I say to everyone is, you don't need anybody's permission to make an impact. Right? Like, you're going to do it, just do it. And that's what I want to change from the capital markets perspective, because no matter what we talk about, whether it's philanthropy, whatever, if you want to do anything, you need money. That's just the world that we live in as a capitalistic society. But if you want to change that, how do you change that dynamic? And to me, because of technology innovations, because of changing laws like the Jobs Act, it creates an opportunity, and even with blockchain, and why that's been popular in this underpinning movement. But a system where all of us, whether you're a business owner or an investor, don't need to get these checklist of items to give to somebody because they want to see that number of jobs created on this ratio, blah, blah, blah. I want to do something, just go do it. I want to fund it, just go fund it. So that's the world in an organized way that I want to create a different type of capital markets.
So maybe you can add that to my platform. So here's what to do, and then here's the money to do it.
There you go. There you go. All right. I'm going to take a few questions from the Slido app, and we're trying to make them so that it makes sense. Let's see. This is for Kyle. Does this mean that endowments can now be mobilized too, if backed by a group like your Dallas model?
Yes.
All right.
To be simple, with the endowments can be mobilized. What we've tried to structure is an innovative PRI, where again, the philanthropic community can come in and share in that risk proportionally with other guarantors that are willing to do that. And the whole idea is, let's start getting capital that has been sitting on the sidelines that is so extensive, and start using it in a way that can really drive impact forward through these emerging impact organizations on both the nonprofit and for-profit side. And I think endowments are positioned to do exactly that, because they're meant to be invested in something. They're meant to target a financial return. But if we can start using that, like DAPS is a great example. I mean, it's the thing that not a lot of people are talking about, but it's
Can you explain what
donor advised fund, which is basically people that donated assets so they could get a tax break in a certain tax year, and then it kind of just sits there in a foundation, and they can direct it to be donated over a certain period of time. And I don't know the date on this, but there's a lot of DAP holders that are very active in that process, and so each year they just basically run their foundation out of the DAP. But there's a lot of people that, they had an exit of a company or something, they put the money into that, and then they don't touch it for 10 years. But the whole purpose of it is to be used for impact, and part of it is they just don't know what to do with it. And so there's not a lot of opportunities for them to still earn a return on that and to create real meaningful impact. And I'm not talking about the socially responsible investing and negative screening and positive screening. I'm talking about actually mobilizing that capital for real on-the-ground impact.
And just to add some color on the donor advised fund, how many of you are familiar with Beyond Meat, that recent IPO? Okay, really well performing IPO. Some of their original funding was from that time. So,
yep.
So I mean, the tools are there, it's just a matter of change behavior. Okay, so Youngro, this is a question for you from Anonymous. It's not bad, trust me, it has been screened. What are some typical examples of local projects that your platform has supported? Is there a project that you're really, really proud of, or you just...
Yeah, I mean, so for that, I mean, this is all evolution.
Yeah.
And like Southwest is a business model that I really admire because they started small and figured out how to expand it. So eventually we want to do everything for everyone.
Southwest Airlines.
Airlines, yeah. But as a business strategy, to start, we really focus on local businesses because that's the most direct form of connection between a business and investors around it that are likely to invest in them.
Right.
So to date, it's been really the word we like to use, experiential businesses, whether it's food and beverage, health, fitness, gyms, like anything that you feel like you can get that in person only that is not going to be disrupted by Amazon, because reality is everyone else buys everything else. So that's kind of what we've done, and it's interesting things started happening is as you start working on these local businesses, there's a direct connection to real estate. So we've been actually getting a lot of inquiries from real estate developers and real estate projects because they don't want to build a fancy building and put Starbucks and J. Crew in there anymore. They want the local coffee shop and they want the local merchant because that's what we want as consumers.
Right.
So now we're discussing various strategies, and you'll see soon, we're literally starting to do real estate projects on our platform. We're going to be working with an actual hotel development that's significant sizes. If you guys are heard of some opportunity zones, we're literally launching opportunity funds now that are actually taking investments and so on and so forth. So a lot of different things are happening in the world of finance, and what we're trying to do is continue our mission, but as you kind of get the theme, I'm not saying, hey, feel good about yourself. I'm saying these are good investment opportunities in the local communities. If you want in, this happens to be a way, and by the way, obviously you're making an impact as you're creating jobs.
I guess to kind of bring it back a little bit, is there one business, a bar, restaurant that you say, that's the place I want to go? I mean, like that.
I love all of our partners.
No, of course. But they're not in the room.
But the story that this isn't even one of our businesses, but if you go to Greenway Plaza, we just started this concept called NextSeed Space, which is basically a permanent pop-up shop that we enter into a JV with the landlord for. And what we do is basically let businesses just test. We all take it for granted that a restaurant comes up, but it's actually so hard to open a restaurant.
Right.
So right now there's a group called Club, which was a Central Mexican cuisine pop-up that they were just running around different bars and locations, and now they're in there. Their food is amazing, and they literally didn't cost them a dollar. We just tell them just go in and start doing your stuff. You have a 3-month contract. We took care of all the back end with our landlord, just the back end. So they show them the test. And if you like it, now you know how to manage a business. Now if you want to expand, we're going to potentially help you raise capital to open your new location. We did that. Our first location was the first test was a group called Waffle Bus, which was a food truck, and we raised $100,000 in less than 24 hours because they're that popular. They're not going into a Heights location permanently, but this was their test ground to actually start marketing. So even though the product that we work on is investment securities, we really view ourselves as trying to create an ecosystem that is creating an infrastructure for people to be able to advance.
Well, everyone, I think I'd like to just give the panelists a warm round of applause. I do have a favor to ask. I'd ask you to stick around because we have the closing speaker, Christopher Nett with Collaboration Capital. At the other building. Don't follow me because I got everyone lost last time, so follow someone who looks like they know where they're going. Chris is a really thoughtful and accomplished ambassador for this community, so I hope that you stick around for the next speaker.